Stress is a universal experience, something every human encounters in some form throughout life. It is the body's natural response to challenges, threats, or demands, preparing us to act, react, and survive. While stress in moderation can be motivating and adaptive, chronic stress is far more insidious, quietly influencing both mind and body in ways that can have long-term consequences. Understanding the psychology of stress and its physical effects is essential for cultivating awareness, resilience, and well-being. Stress is not merely a feeling of tension. It is a full-body experience that engages the brain, nervous system, hormones, and even cellular function, shaping health outcomes in profound ways. The origins of stress lie in the human brain, which is wired to detect threats and respond rapidly. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure, acts as the brain's alarm system, scanning the environment for potential danger. When the amygdala perceives a threat, whether real or imagined, it signals the hypothalamus to initiate the stress response. This triggers a cascade of hormonal and neural activity, preparing the body for the classic fight or flight reaction, even when the threat is psychological, such as fear of failure, social judgment, or financial insecurity. The brain reacts as if physical danger were present, mobilizing the body for survival. The hypothalamic pituitary, adrenal, HPA axis, plays a central role in the stress response. Upon activation, the hypothalamus releases corticotropin, releasing hormone, CRH, which signals the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. ACTH then stimulates the adrenal glands to produce cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol affects multiple systems in the body. It increases blood sugar for immediate energy, modulates inflammation, and alters immune function. In the short term, this hormonal surge is adaptive, enhancing alertness, strength, and focus. However, when stress is chronic, persistent cortisol elevation can impair bodily systems, contributing to fatigue, weight gain, hypertension, and immune suppression. The sympathetic nervous system is another crucial component of the stress response, known as the fight or flight branch. It increases heart rate, dilates pupils, redirects blood flow to muscles, and heightens sensory awareness. This state is ideal for responding to acute danger but becomes harmful when constantly activated. Chronic sympathetic arousal can lead to hypertension, cardiovascular strain, digestive issues, and impaired sleep. Meanwhile, the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes rest, digestion, and repair, is often suppressed during chronic stress, preventing the body from returning to equilibrium. The delicate balance between these two systems is critical for physical and psychological health. Stress is not only physiological, it is deeply psychological. The way we perceive and interpret events shapes the intensity and duration of the stress response. Cognitive appraisal, a concept developed by psychologist Richard Lazarus, explains that stress arises not solely from external events, but from our interpretation of them. Two individuals facing the same challenge may experience very different stress levels, depending on their perception of threat, control, and coping ability. Someone who views a tight work deadline as an opportunity may feel energized, while someone who perceives it as a threat may experience anxiety. Cortisol elevation and heightened physiological arousal. Our thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations are powerful modulators of stress. Emotional stress also has profound physiological effects. Anxiety, anger, fear, and sadness trigger neural and hormonal pathways that mirror physical stress. These emotions increase heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension, and they activate stress related brain regions such as the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex. Over time, repeated emotional stress contributes to chronic inflammation, cardiovascular strain, and impaired immune function. The body does not distinguish sharply between physical and psychological threats. The perception of danger alone is sufficient to activate the full stress response. The physical manifestations of stress are diverse and often subtle. Chronic stress can contribute to tension headaches, muscle pain, fatigue, digestive disturbances, and sleep disruption. The digestive system is particularly vulnerable. Stress diverts blood flow away from the stomach and intestines, slows digestion, and alters gut microbiota. This can exacerbate conditions such as irritable bowel syndrome, acid reflux, or inflammatory bowel disease. The immune system, too, is compromised under prolonged stress. While acute stress temporarily boosts immune vigilance, chronic stress suppresses antibody production, impairs natural killer cell activity, and increases susceptibility to infections. Cardiovascular health is heavily impacted by stress. Elevated cortisol and chronic sympathetic activation increase heart rate, blood pressure, and arterial inflammation, contributing to the risk of heart disease, stroke, and metabolic disorders. Stress also promotes unhealthy coping behaviors, such as overeating, smoking, alcohol use, or sedentary lifestyle, further compounding cardiovascular risk. Even seemingly minor daily stresses, traffic jams, interpersonal conflict, or financial concerns, can have cumulative effects on the heart when experienced repeatedly over months or years. Stress also influences metabolism and body weight. Cortisol increases appetite and promotes fat storage, particularly around the abdomen. Chronic stress can dysregulate insulin and glucose metabolism, leading to increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Additionally, stress affects sleep quality, which in turn disrupts hunger, regulating hormones like ghrelin and leptin, further promoting weight gain. This illustrates a feedback loop in which psychological stress translates directly into physiological changes that affect metabolism and overall health. Sleep disruption is a hallmark of chronic stress. Elevated cortisol and heightened sympathetic activation interfere with the body's natural sleep-wake cycle, reducing deep, restorative sleep and increasing the likelihood of insomnia. Poor sleep impairs cognitive function, emotional regulation, and immune competence, while also exacerbating stress reactivity. Over time, chronic sleep disruption contributes to a range of physical and mental health issues, including cardiovascular disease, obesity, depression, and anxiety. The interplay between stress and sleep demonstrates the tightly woven connection between mind and body. Stress also accelerates biological aging. Telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, shorten more rapidly under chronic stress, reducing cellular longevity and increasing susceptibility to disease. Oxidative stress and inflammation, both heightened by chronic psychological stress, further contribute to cellular damage and premature aging. This explains why individuals experiencing long-term stress may appear older, feel fatigued, and be at greater risk for age-related illnesses. Psychological stress leaves molecular imprints that affect the very building blocks of our bodies. The relationship between stress and the nervous system is reciprocal. Chronic stress sensitizes neural circuits, particularly in the amygdala, making the brain more reactive to perceived threats. At the same time, chronic stress can impair hippocampal function, reducing the ability to regulate emotions and form new memories effectively. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and rational thinking, is also impacted, weakening cognitive control over emotional and physiological responses. This neurobiological pattern creates a self-perpetuating cycle. Heightened stress reactivity leads to more frequent stress responses, which in turn further alter brain function and increase vulnerability to both psychological and physical disorders. Gastrointestinal health is particularly affected by stress through the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional communication network connecting the central nervous system and the enteric nervous system. Stress alters gut motility, increases intestinal permeability, and changes the composition of gut microbiota. This contributes to digestive discomfort, inflammation, and exacerbation of chronic gut conditions. The microbiome itself influences brain function, mood, and immune regulation, highlighting a dynamic feedback loop where stress affects gut health, and gut health, in turn, affects psychological resilience. The immune system responds dynamically to stress. Acute stress triggers a temporary boost in immune activity, enhancing defense against injury or infection. Chronic stress, however, suppresses immune responses, reducing lymphocyte proliferation and impairing antibody production. This makes the body more susceptible to infections, slows wound healing, and exacerbates autoimmune conditions. Cytokine imbalance induced by stress contributes to systemic inflammation, which is implicated in cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and metabolic disorders. Thoughts, emotions, and perceived threats therefore have tangible consequences for immune competence and overall physical health. Hormonal imbalances are another consequence of stress. Beyond cortisol, chronic stress alters thyroid function, reproductive hormones, and growth hormone regulation. Women may experience irregular menstrual cycles or exacerbated menopausal symptoms, while men may experience reductions in testosterone. These hormonal disruptions affect mood, energy, metabolism, and sexual function, illustrating the pervasive influence of psychological stress across physiological systems. The endocrine system serves as a critical bridge between mind and body, translating perceived threats into hormonal signals that can promote adaptation or contribute to disease. Stress also affects musculoskeletal health. Muscle tension is a common physiological response to perceived threats, and chronic stress leads to persistent contraction of neck, shoulder, and back muscles. This tension contributes to headaches, joint pain, and postural problems. Over time, repetitive strain and tightness can exacerbate chronic pain conditions, highlighting the interconnectedness of psychological stress and physical discomfort. Relaxation techniques, mindful movement, and stretching can counteract these effects, demonstrating that intentional cognitive and behavioral interventions can modulate physiological stress responses. Mental health and stress are deeply intertwined. Chronic stress increases the risk of anxiety, depression, and burnout, which themselves exacerbate physical stress responses. The interplay between psychological and physiological stress creates a feedback loop, in which worry, rumination, and emotional dysregulation reinforce sympathetic nervous system activation and HPA axis hyperactivity. Addressing stress requires a holistic approach that integrates cognitive, emotional, and behavioral strategies alongside awareness of physical symptoms. Recognizing the mind-body connection is essential for breaking cycles of chronic stress and preventing long-term health consequences. Social and environmental factors modulate stress effects. Supportive relationships buffer against stress, promoting parasympathetic activation, reducing cortisol, and improving immune function. Conversely, social isolation, conflict, or exposure to chronic environmental stresses amplifies physiological stress responses. The perception of safety, belonging, and social connection translates into measurable health benefits, illustrating that stress is not only an individual psychological phenomenon, but also a relational and social experience with profound biological consequences. Coping strategies determine whether stress is adaptive or harmful. Active coping, problem solving, mindfulness, and social support enhance resilience, reducing the harmful physiological impacts of stress. Maladaptive coping, such as avoidance, substance use, or emotional suppression, prolongs sympathetic activation, elevates cortisol, and promotes inflammation. Developing effective coping mechanisms is therefore central to mitigating the physical toll of stress and fostering long-term well-being. Thought patterns, emotional regulation, and behavior interact continuously to determine the overall impact of stress on the body. Exercise provides a powerful means of modulating stress responses. Physical activity activates the parasympathetic nervous system, improves cardiovascular function, reduces inflammation, and promotes the release of endorphins and neurotrophic factors that enhance mood and cognitive function. Regular exercise reduces the physiological impact of stressors, improves resilience, and supports recovery from both acute and chronic stress. Movement becomes a bridge between mental states and bodily health, demonstrating that intentional engagement with the body influences stress regulation at multiple levels. Mindfulness and meditation are equally effective in mitigating stress. These practices cultivate present moment awareness, reduce rumination, and downregulate amygdala hyperactivity. Neuroimaging studies show that meditation enhances prefrontal cortex activity, supporting cognitive control over emotional responses, while reducing sympathetic nervous system activation. Physiologically, mindfulness lowers blood pressure, reduces cortisol, improves immune function, and supports heart rate variability. By shifting attention and reframing perceptions, meditation translates thoughts into measurable physiological benefits, exemplifying the power of cognitive interventions in stress regulation. Breathing techniques are another accessible tool for modulating stress. Slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing activates the vagus nerve, engaging the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing heart rate, and promoting relaxation. Controlled breathing influences cortisol levels, blood pressure, and muscle tension, providing an immediate physiological pathway to counteract sympathetic arousal. Thoughts that direct attention to the breath serve as cognitive cues that regulate bodily systems, demonstrating the interdependence of mental focus and physical response in stress management. Nutrition also interacts with stress physiology. Chronic stress alters appetite, cravings, and digestion, leading to consumption patterns that may exacerbate inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. Conversely, mindful eating, nutrient-rich diets, and attention to hydration can modulate stress responses, reduce systemic inflammation, and support cognitive function. The connection between what we consume, how we think, and how we feel underscores the holistic nature of stress and its physiological consequences. Finally, recovery practices such as adequate sleep, relaxation rituals, and restorative activities allow the nervous system to reset, reducing sympathetic dominance and supporting HPA axis regulation. Chronic stress impairs recovery processes, but intentional strategies such as napping, gentle movement, and mental relaxation foster repair, immune function, and cellular regeneration. Recovery is a critical phase in the stress cycle, illustrating that stress is not only about challenge but also about how the body returns to balance, guided by both mental and behavioral practices. In conclusion, stress is a multifaceted phenomenon, with deep psychological roots and extensive physical consequences. The brain interprets threats, engages the HPA axis and sympathetic nervous system, and sends signals that influence nearly every organ system in the body. Chronic stress contributes to cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysregulation, immune suppression, digestive issues, musculoskeletal tension, and accelerated aging. Yet the mind also offers tools for healing and resilience: cognitive reframing, mindfulness, meditation, visualization, social support, exercise, breathing, and recovery practices can modulate stress physiology, restore balance, and promote long-term health. Understanding the psychology of stress and its physical effects empowers individuals to intervene consciously, shaping thoughts, behaviors, and environments in ways that protect the body, nurture the mind, and foster a resilient, healthy life. Stress is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And by harnessing awareness and intentional strategies, we can transform the body's response to challenge into a pathway for growth, vitality, and well-being.